Welcome to a new edition of If I Ever Live to Be. I'm very excited and honored because I have my colleague, my mentor, my friend, Brandon Smith. He's known as the workplace therapist on the show with us today. And don't tell anybody else, Brandon. Don't tell any other guests. You're probably going to be my favorite of all time.
That's too much pressure, Whitney. That's
You're the
way too
ghost.
much pressure. We haven't even done the show yet.
Yep. Well, I just
Goodness.
hooked everyone in. They will have to listen now. But you also, you're the author of 2 books, which I have
Mhm.
on the screen if you're watching. Your first was The Hot Sauce Principle: How to Live and Lead in a World Where Everything is Urgent All the Time. And your second is The Author versus Editor Dilemma: The Leadership Secret to Unlocking Your Team, Your Time, and Your Impact. Obviously, both of which I've read several times. And you are quite the expert, good sir, quite the leader. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Whitney. Really thrilled to be here. I've been waiting for this invitation. So, I was very excited when you
Very
invited me.
good. Well, and I'm glad. I appreciate just the work you do is so important, and you travel a lot for it, and you have a family, 3 kiddos, 2 pups, beautiful wife, Emily, who I love. So thank you for coming on and just sharing of your time.
Yeah, happy to.
All right, so I teed you up a little bit when we were talking before I hit the record button, but I was like, "Brandon, I just wanna dive into your story," and I was like, "Go wherever you wanna go with it," because I guess I'll kinda give the end away before we dive in, but I feel like you're one of those people. Each time I hang around you, I learn something new. I feel encouraged. I feel seen. And I just feel like you're a joy to the world, and there's, like, there are multiple people, right, that we know that say that about you. My whole whole family says that about you, and I feel like that's almost a wow factor in the sense of, if you don't know your story, you have plenty of reason to be mad at the world, and you choose not to be. So I'm gonna leave it there and allow you to just share your story, how it started, and how you got into this world of leadership and executive coaching and just leading others to essentially be like better humans at home and at work.
Okay, Whitney. That's a big opening. All right. So here's how I'm going to do my story. For listeners, I'm going to start with the present just to give them a little context as to what I do, because I think it will set up my story in a better way to
Love it.
just know how I spend my time today.
Yeah.
So as you said, my handle's the workplace therapist. My entire purpose and passion in life is one singular thing, and that's to eliminate all workplace dysfunction everywhere forever. So it looks a lot of different ways. Sometimes I'm doing executive coaching, working individually with folks. I have a clinical therapy background. Sometimes I'm working with teams, helping teams kind of navigate through some issues and challenges. Sometimes I'm teaching. I teach at Emory University here in Atlanta, Georgia. I teach in the business school and all the areas related to leadership and workplace communication for all the graduate programs and executive education. Been teaching there since 2008. So sometimes it looks like that. Sometimes it means writing books. Sometimes it means podcasts, keynote speaking. I use my voice to do much of my work, and I think that's an important part of the story. So let me kind of back all the way up to the beginning. So I'm the youngest of 3 boys. I had, 2 older brothers that were, 12 and 11 years older than me. So my parents were told, "We can't have kids," and so they adopted my 2 brothers, and then surprise, this guy kinda shows up on the scene. And my dad was 40, my mom was 37, so back in the day, they would, they were not expecting me to even turn out in even a healthy way, so the doctors
Yeah.
actually told my mom, they said, "He's gonna be short and he's gonna be slow." And my mom, being a good Midwesterner who's not very emotive, she said, "Well, can I do anything about that?" And they said, "Well, no, no." She said, "Well, why are we talking about that?" So I'm 6'2", by the way.
I was
So I
gonna
may be,
say,
I
you're
may
very
be
tall.
slow, I may be slow, but I'm not
No,
sure.
you're not. I
So,
was gonna say neither one of those is
so
true.
we can debate on the slow part, but I'm not sure. So I show up. My dad worked for Mead Paper Company. He was originally as an engineer, and he worked for Mead Paper Company his whole career, 38 years. And so we moved from paper mill town to paper mill town. And if you've ever been in a paper mill town, you know you're in a paper mill town because
Mm,
you can smell the paper mill town.
mhm.
Smells kind of like rotten eggs. What they use, the sulfur and everything they use to kind of break down the pulp, is quite a unique smell. So we moved around from paper mill town to paper mill town. I generally think of my childhood as, as fine. But if I was really honest, it was pretty dysfunctional. And so my oldest brother, Chris, he was in and out of jail or rehab centers my entire life growing up. So he typically wasn't around. When he was around, lots of yelling and screaming in my house. So he'll steal something, and we lived in a lot of small towns. So he'd steal something, and then he would go sell it like the local antique store. And my mom loved going to the local antique store, and then she'd find her stuff for sale in the local antique store.
Wow.
So lots of yelling and screaming. We kind of moved around from those towns until we eventually settled down into Atlanta. My dad was transferred to the packaging division of Mead, which serves the beverage industry, makes cartons for uh, like Coca-Cola, for example, which is why we moved here. And then when I was 10, my brother Chris, he was in a rehab center in Florida. He didn't want to do it anymore, so he kind of left on his own and then hitchhiked his way back to Atlanta. And so he was living with us for a few months, and then one night he just decided life was too hard, and he went out and took his own life. And that was particularly traumatic for me and my family.
Mhm.
So much so that I came down with an uncontrollable stutter, and that was going into middle school, which I do not recommend. And so every day before going to my classes, I would see my speech therapist early in the morning, and we'd work on my B's and my P's and my T's, because any of those letters would trip me up, and I couldn't. I would get stuck, and that was it. So my nightmare was always if I was at one of my friends' houses and they would say, "Yeah, let's go order a pizza. Hey, Brandon, you go order the pizza, a pepperoni pizza." That order never got completed. It just pop, 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 pop. That was it. So given how skinny little kids, which I was with a stutter, are treated in middle school, and given my kind of dysfunction at home, my parents are very non-emotive. I think the way they protect themselves from pain is just don't feel it.
Mm.
And try to keep their distance. So my entire life, my dad's 92, but even in recent years, my entire life, if I tried to talk to my dad about anything going on in my life, my business, my marriage, anything, he would stick his hand all the way in my face. He'd wave it back and forth, and he'd say, "Stop talking. None of my business." He just didn't want to know anything about me, because I think that was his way of keeping himself safe. So if something happened to me, he wouldn't feel that same pain he felt with Chris. But as a result, I have no real connection to my mom or my dad. My mom is the same way. I mean, they're still alive. My mom's 89, my dad's 92, but I don't feel really much towards them. They're like strangers because we just don't have any real connection. So it was a emotionally and relationally kind of vacant place to grow up. And I was very much on my own. I mean, I remember days just packing a lunch at 5 years old and going off and playing in the woods, and then coming home when it
Mm.
got when it got dark. So when we had that my brother's passing and I had that stutter, I basically made a decision. Well, people are just really messy. They're dysfunctional. I don't really want to deal with them. So I just became a world class wallflower. So going into high school, I just said, you know what? I'm going to distance myself from people. They don't really bring me a whole lot of joy and love. So I'm kind of good. Went off to college, waited till the very last moment to declare my major, and based on all the tests that I took and what they had to offer, the major that I selected was communications. So I can see kind of the irony in all this. And so, like any good communication majors, when I graduated from college, I didn't have a job lined up. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I took a job for a small chain of retail stores. And this particular retail store, it was a family owned business. They had 15 stores, primarily in the Atlanta metro area. And my boss was the son-in-law of the owner. So the woman who started the business, her daughter marries this guy. He's my boss. Okay. So he greets me on the first day of work. Now, I'd worked lots of other jobs in high school, mowed lawns, worked in retail stores. I did lots of stuff. But this was my first real full-time job. So he greets me at the door. He says, "I'm really excited to have you here. You're going to be the assistant manager of the store. But before we get started, I have a task for you. Waiting for you in the back room is the current assistant manager, but he doesn't know you're coming. So your job is to go back there and fire him, and you get his job." And that was my first task on my first real day of work. Went back there and had to let that guy go, and then I got his job. And then my boss did everything we are trained not to do as leaders. So he loves surprise visits. He loved to try and catch someone doing something wrong. So he'd do a surprise visit to the store and say, he'd pull me in the back room. He'd say, I don't like what Sharon's wearing. Go fire her. And I had to do more layoffs during that time than any other time in my career. And that experience kind of woke me up, made me realize a couple things about my life. First, it made me realize work should not have to suck. It can be a source of fulfillment and meaning and purpose.
Yeah.
Doesn't always have to be a source of, stress and anxiety. Now I get it. Like, it's work and we get anxious about work and stressed out about work, but we have a lot of choice, a lot more choice than maybe we recognize about where we work, who we work with, how we work. We can choose a lot of things. We can't choose necessarily the families we get. We get what we get. Like when my kids were, in pre-kindergarten, they were always told, you get what you get and you don't pitch a fit. Like, you get what you get, and that's it. You can't really choose your family,
Right,
but you
right.
can choose your workplaces. So that was my first aha. Second aha, if my leader, my boss, was any indication of the state of leadership in the world today, I wanted to change that. This was not good. Like, he every time he walked in the store, he created chaos and pain. It was not necessary.
Wow.
So I wanted to change leadership. And third, that was where my purpose was born. I wanted to cure workplace dysfunction everywhere forever, having no idea kind of how that was going to unfold. So that sent me down a path because that's what I wanted to do. And I was 23 years old. No one's going to hire a 23-year-old to be an executive coach, obviously. And there wasn't a lot of executive coaching certificates back in the day. So I said, well, I'm going to go get a
Right.
clinical therapy degree. So I went to Georgia State. I got a clinical therapy degree, practiced in the kind of inpatient world for a little while, worked at a place called Ridgeview Institute, which is a mental health facility that has kind of all of life's curveballs. So bipolar disorder, narcissism, addiction, chemical dependency, eating disorders, behavioral disorders with little kids. I mean, dementia, you name it, it had a wide swath of life's
Mm,
curveballs. I did that for a number of years. That was one of the places actually my brother Chris had stayed. So I was
mm,
now on the other side of that. Worked there for a while, got my clinical therapy degree, and then I transitioned into the corporate world. I wanted to learn kind of the language of corporate and how it kind of works. Did that, worked for a large global insurance company for a few years, primarily working with credit unions and regional banks. So that's where I started learning how to do training and teaching. I did training for all these banks and credit unions, all these financial institutions. And then I pivoted and got my MBA. I went to Emory, so I got my full-time MBA at Emory, and at the end of that kind of journey, I received a job offer. I actually received a job offer at Deloitte, the consulting firm, in their human capital practice. But what's unique about that offer was two things. First, I was standing in Northside Hospital when that offer was made to me, and my wife Emily had just given birth to our second kiddo, Noah. And it's funny, sidebar. I think I'm a big fan. I'm a big believer that God has a sense of humor. We don't always like it in the moment, but I think he has a sense of humor. So while Noah is being born, and we'd already picked out his name, we knew his name was going to be Noah. Of course, what happens to our house? Our basement floods. Of course, no one else is flooded, just ours. But that's fine. So our basement's flooding while my son Noah is being born. Uh,
I did not know that part of the story.
yep. Basement flooded while he was
Wow.
being born. So I get this offer to join Deloitte. It was a big deal. I was the first person, and they told me I was the first person in the country that they gave this offer to. Everyone
Wow.
else was still kind of exploring their opportunity and seeing if they were going to get an offer. I got one early, and they said, "Don't tell anybody." And that was going to be 100% travel, and I did not want to leave a young family and be on the road every week. I just didn't want to do that. So this kind of image came to mind for me, like I'd been building a ship this whole time, trying to get ready to launch and do this executive coaching thing and curing workplace dysfunction thing. I had my clinical therapy degree. I had my MBA. I had some corporate work experience. So my ship had some things on it, but my ship still had holes in the bottom. But frankly, the weather was never going to be better to set sail. I mean, I was broke. So it was easy to go from broke to broke. Took a big salary, which Deloitte offered me a signing bonus. Who doesn't want a signing bonus? Like, that's cool. A signing bonus. Anyway, so if I took that, then I was going to have to walk away from that salary at some point, or I could just start at zero, which is where I was already. And so I turned down their offer and hung my shingle. That was back in
Wow.
2005, and that kind of started me kind of on my journey. Uh, and so I started teaching at Georgia State, and then they brought me back over to Emory to teach, and my kind of teaching took off. They brought me into Georgia Public Broadcasting for a little bit, at first as a
Yeah.
guest. So I came in to GPB. They had a call-in show called At Work, and so it was a call-in show. Folks would call in about workplace stuff, and they brought me in one day as a guest. And they were like, "Oh, this is good. This guy's pretty good. Like, let's bring him back next week." That turned into 3 years. By the end of that stint, I was hosting the show, and I had another colleague on the show that I was with, and he was very different from me. He called himself an executive coach, but he would yell at the callers, and give them, bark at them, give them direction, which is never what they were actually even talking about. So someone one day said, "What's different about you, Brandon?" I said, "I'm more like a workplace therapist," and that's kind of where that little handle was born. It was just an accidental kind of description I was using to describe me versus this other person, and so that then GPB time ultimately led to me meeting you. And so we've known each
Yes.
other for a long time, started in the radio world. So I cut my teeth there, but spent a lot of time, like I said, on radio, podcasts, do keynotes, teach lots of classes, won teaching awards, all that sort of thing, which I'm very proud of. I think what makes me most proud of all that, to kind of summarize and get us up to present, I actually don't like public speaking. I teach
Mm.
classes on it. I
Mhm.
get great marks on it, but it's very anxiety producing for me. And that's, I think, the big surprise to most people is that it's not fun for me. Some public speakers, they just love the spotlight and they just get revved up. I don't, because I'm always thinking I got that stutter in the back of my mind, and it kind of any time it could turn around. So brings me up to present. My daughter Abby's my oldest. She's 24. She lives in Midtown Atlanta. She works for Deloitte in their human capital practice.
Full circle.
Full circle. And then Noah's at University of Georgia, and Aaron's at University
Go
of
dogs.
of of Virginia. So, he's my youngest, my freshman.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure I've left out a lot, but that's the story, Whitney.
Yes. I love this so much. I was thinking of so many different ways I wanted to take this. Okay. The first two, I don't want you to give away all your secrets, but in curing workplace dysfunction everywhere until the end of time, what's one way that you do that today? So what's one super pervasive problem that you possibly see in almost every workplace or that you commonly see? And how do you go in and what's a remedy? What's kind of the prescription to fix that?
Oh, I can answer this in so many ways because there's so many pervasive dysfunctions in the workplace today, and
I
frankly,
mean,
in
you've
our
you've
lives today.
you've written the book on 2,
Yeah.
2 of them, right?
Well, maybe that's a good starting place. Let's start with
Yeah.
those 2 books. So those books are sister books. In
Yes.
fact, the way that I write my books, I do it business fable style. So it kind of tells a story. And then in the front of every chapter is the story. The back of every chapter is kind of tools and techniques you can use and kind of what's going on in the story, and other mini stories of clients I've worked with in each chapter. So it's a very, very practical books. So the first book, The Hot Sauce Principle, How to Live and Lead in a World Where Everything is Urgent All the Time. That's our first major kind of dysfunction that's nice, Whitney. Nice job. She's holding it up. So that's our first major dysfunction, which is essentially everything's urgent. And what that does is it puts us into firefighter mode. So now we're moving around, we're just putting out fires, putting out fires, putting out fires, putting out fires. And everyone listening to this, if you're still working right now, you totally relate to that. Yeah, he's a firefighter. There's nothing wrong with being a firefighter. I want to be clear though, firefighters are not leaders. Firefighters are not leaders. Firefighters are not leaders. Firefighters are firefighters. Because a firefighter, the position is reactive. That's our
Right.
posture. We're reacting to the fire. We run out, we put the fire out, we go back, we wait for another fire. We're reactive. Leadership is the exact opposite. It's proactive. We're setting a vision as leaders. We're setting a strategy. We're setting plans and putting those in motion. We're inspiring people. We're motivating people. Taking people down a path towards the promised land. Okay, that's leadership. That's a proactive activity.
And I
And
feel
so,
like if you're doing that well, you should be avoiding the fires, right?
yeah, and so there's a lot of things I think we are short on courage. So boards or analysts or whatever they put pressure on CEOs to do more IT implementations. And as an example, everybody listening to this, if you work in a company, you're undergoing an IT implementation right now. Guaranteed, I promise you, you are. I don't even have to say that. You know you are. So they put too many things urgent at the same time, and it creates chaos and confusion. So urgency used in the right doses, focus and prioritization, overused, chaos and confusion. I use the analogy of hot sauce, which is I'm holding a bottle right now, and that's a great analogy. Few drops creates focus. I put this on my eggs at Waffle House, rice, it's great.
Yes.
Put this on everything, appetizers covered in hot sauce, salads doused in hot sauce, entrees in a pool of hot sauce, desserts swimming in hot sauce, and you just get a glass of this Tabasco with a few ice cubes for you to drink. You're like me. You're going to be even redder than I am right now. And you're going to be curled up in a ball, kind of begging for relief. So in most places, it is like that. It's chaos and confusion. So,
Yeah.
so that's one. So then that ties into the other book, the author versus editor dilemma.
Yes.
And the idea behind that is knowing what seat to sit in when with our leader and also our direct reports, if we have direct reports. And the idea is we should be authoring up, editing down. Folks should be bringing us things for us to react to. We edit and then we give our approval and they go off and do it. But we don't do that because everything's urgent. We flip those seats and we author down. We tell folks what to do, or we say, don't worry about it. I'll just do it myself. And we end up getting burned out. We end up working 60 plus hours trying to do everything ourselves because we feel like it's all on our shoulders. And that is every leader I work with is doing that. Their default is just run around firefighting, telling folks what to do. So we're not empowering our teams and we're burning ourselves out. And so I'll often say to my leaders that I'm coaching them, and when they're in that mode, I'll say, are you trying to win an MVP? Or are you trying to win a world championship? Because those are two very different muscles.
Yep.
An MVP, I'm on the field, I'm scoring points. I'm trying to win a world championship. I'm off. I'm on the sidelines. I got a clipboard. I'm calling plays. I'm setting culture. I'm setting strategy. I'm trying to win a world championship. So I would say those are two very pervasive issues. But even that pace of play, that urgency that we've got, it immediately starts to deteriorate into the first core ingredient necessary to prevent and cure dysfunction, and that is clarity. So when we are clear, it makes dysfunction a lot harder for it to live. Dysfunction's like fungus, it lives in dark places. So driving clarity is like shining light. So clarity around roles, clarity around goals, clarity around culture, feedback, expectations, all those sorts of things, which creates intention, which you need to do that. You need time and intentionality. We don't have time. We don't do intentionality. We just run around from fire to fire to fire. And
Yeah.
no one really knows what their role's supposed to be or talk about culture or expectations. And then that can allow folks that maybe want to be a little bit less than kind of top performers to kind of cause some issues and hang out and not do their job and all those sorts of things. So, I mean, again, we could go down this path even further, Whitney, but I think that's a good setup. That urgency as a starting place kicks off a whole host of dysfunctions that just require a lot of courage and intentionality by leaders to kind of put an end to.
Yes. When I feel like that ties in with my next question that I would love to ask you, because I feel like if we're so distracted by those fires that we just kind of become very task oriented and we get outside of our mission and our role. But I want to go back to something you said of your story of like, you don't like this public speaking thing is not your favorite thing to do. And I feel like as a society, we're very, oh, if it doesn't feel good, then I shouldn't do it, or that's not part of the mission or the greater story, right? We're kind of seeking or pleasure seekers. And so we're like, oh, that doesn't feel right. So it must not be like what I need to be doing. I'd love for you to speak to that because I feel like that dives into a little bit of that resiliency and knowing what your mission is. Because if you're just constantly dropping out of the game every time a wall hits or you don't feel right about it, like, where are we going here?
Yeah. Okay. So I teach in a business school. So I have to use it. I have at some point I'm required in this podcast to use a Venn diagram.
Okay. Is it
So
all
yeah,
right? Here we
it's a
go.
requirement it's in my contract. It's like every time you talk, you must at
All
least use
right.
one Venn diagram. For those of you that don't know what a Venn diagram is, it's the three circles, like the three circles that are connected, and you're trying to get in the middle of the three circles. Okay. So we got three circles. So one of our circles is passion. It's what I love to do, what excites me, kind of fires me up. That's great. That's a circle. But there's two more circles. Another circle is strengths, the natural God-given talents that you were given, and then hopefully you turn those into a strength with, kind of work and effort. I actually believe that should be the starting place
Okay.
for everyone. You can be passionate about. So I'll give you an example. When I worked way back in the day at that retail store, we had to do displays. And I had a woman in my store who was like begging to do displays. She's like, I love displays. I want to do displays. I do them in my house all the time. I'm so excited. It would be thrilling to do displays. I said, go for it. You're going to do the displays. Those were the worst displays I've ever seen.
Yeah, that
She
was
was
where I
passionate.
had
She
feared
was,
that
pa-
story.
she was passionate. She did not have the talent to do that. Okay. So talent is important because when we are leveraging those talents, those strengths, we do things better and faster than everybody else. Or in other words, that's where efficiency lives, or that's where balance lives. Okay. Because if you can do things better and faster than anyone else, you
Yeah,
just got yourself some free time. Or you can just continue to do more of it and you make more money. But either way, I'm a big believer in identifying those things. And then the third circle, because we do our Venn diagram, we got our third circle. Our third circle is our purpose or the need in the world you want to meet. So for me, I grew up in an emotional and relational vacuum. I was alone. My entire life was alone. I raised myself, my career. I didn't get any advice or encouragement. In fact, I got the opposite. My parents would say, that doesn't make any sense. Don't do that. Do this safe thing over here. So I very much wanted to invest in helping create healthier, better relationships. And workplaces, one of those places I get to do that.
yeah.
So finding the need in the world and purpose, that's a whole other discussion we could go down. The kind of famous psychologist Viktor Frankl, he's the kind of founder of existential psychology. He was a Jewish physician in Austria during World War II. He and his family were taken into concentration camps, and his entire family was killed. Victor was the only one who survived. And when he came out, he started existential psychology, basically saying that you can get through anything in life if you have this deep sense of kind of purpose. And he noticed when his colleagues lost that deep sense of purpose, they would curl up in a ball and die the next day. The one for the concentration camps. So he started that. So I'm a big believer in kind of finding that too. So finding that need in the world you want to meet, and purpose doesn't always have to come from challenges we have, but more often than not, it does. Purpose is born in pain. It's born in those areas where of those needs that we didn't get and we want to give to others. Because that is a fire in our belly that is difficult to put out. So I would rather, if I would, it's a long-winded answer to your question, but I think it's an important
Mhm.
answer to your question.
Yes.
The starting place is strengths. Get really clear on what are those God-given talents you've got that you can do better, faster, easier than anyone else. Okay. Now that's a whole circle. That doesn't necessarily mean it connects with the other stuff. So, for example, I
Mm.
was really good in physics. Uh, may surprise people, but I was really good at physics in high school, like really good. I did not care about physics. Like I was good at it, but I didn't. And I took physics for engineers when I went off to college, and so Vanderbilt, which is where I went for undergrad, they have an engineering degree, and I took a class of physics for engineers. I realized quickly this is not something I want to pursue because the folks in there were all good at it and they liked it, and I did not like it. So it's finding your strengths, and then I think the next starting place, if you can, would be purpose. I do think purpose is really, really important, but that may take a little while longer to uncover and discover. And then passion again is so what brings you energy when you do it. Now I will say I get a lot of energy when I do speaking engagements, but there's tremendous anxiety prior to it.
Sure.
So it's a big roller coaster ride for me. So, but that's how I would say start it off. The advice of giving that people are given, just pursue your passions, probably not what I would recommend as a starting place.
Well, these podcasts are actually very selfish because thank you. You just helped me answer a question I had about my own little path.
Good.
So I appreciate that. You're just going to have to come back because I still have so many questions that I know would be helpful to others. We're running a little bit short on our time. So the last two questions that I want to ask you, I shall ask. And if we have extra time, I'll ask you the other burning question on my mind. I know, doesn't that just it's tantalizing. You wanna know what the questions are. So the first one is the question that I ask every guest, Brandon, and that really has to do with the title of the podcast, but it's "If I Ever Live to Be." So when you sit down and you think about that and consider life and this really God-given path you're on, what does Brandon wanna live to be? What does he wanna be known for?
It's a really good question, Whitney. I'm gonna answer it in a I don't necessarily have a one-word answer for this. So I'm gonna go back a little bit to my story. So, my wife and I, my family, not particularly close and connected. My wife's family, that's a whole other story, but essentially, we're at kind of a no contact phase with them too. Very, very, kind of unhealthy dynamic, okay? And what it hit me was I thought if I look at it from a spiritual standpoint, I thought this was what God intended me to do with my life, was my vocation, cure workplace dysfunction. And by the way, because I don't work for any company, and that's by design, I love that. It allows people to come to me without any barriers, and I can work with lots of people. So I
Yes.
work with nonprofits, I work with churches, I work with universities, I work with big companies, small companies, lots of folks. So I really felt like that was my calling. I'm reflecting on that, thinking maybe that was kind of that was my vocational first calling, but my bigger purpose is to reset our family tree. And
Wow.
that actually kind of tears me up when I think about that because I think
Yeah.
that's the thing that is the most important. So I would want to be probably known as someone that did that and did that well, like created a new family that was better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, obviously have me tearing up because as we said, we've known each other for almost no, over 10 years.
Oh yeah, I think
And
it's well into 15.
yeah, and I can so see that. It's just like I open with the show, I can so see that as your path because I feel like you're already doing that. Looking back on it, I've used this description so many times, probably because it just recently dawned on me that this is really how life is, but I feel like life is like this tapestry where it's absolute mess on the back end of like knots and zigzags and strings that are hanging all over the place. But if you look at it from the front end, it's this beautiful picture. And I feel like that can relate to what you just said in the sense of like all of this in the back kind of looks like a mess. But I really feel like you taking that and moving forward all along, that's been speaking into what you just described
Yeah.
of
Well, I
you
hope
resetting
so.
that.
I hope so. And at the moment, all 3 of my kids like me. So that's good.
I don't foresee that changing one bit at all.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got just a couple of minutes left. I definitely want you to share your contact information. So for anyone listening and they're like, yes, we need that in our team, or maybe they're an individual and they just feel stuck and they're like, how do I get to this next level? How do they reach out to you, Brandon?
The simplest way is you can just Google the workplace therapist and you'll find me. I just think there's one more person in Australia who's recently been using that. I know, but that's the other side of the planet.
On the
So
other
you can
side of the
find me really
pond.
easily that way. You can just do Brandon at theworkplacetherapist.com if you want to email me. Of course, LinkedIn is great. I, I put out content every week with the wonderful Whitney's help. We get to kind of put out content to kind of make people's workplaces a little bit better, some practical tools to bring a little more hope to workplaces. So
Yes.
lots of ways to find me. I'm not a hard guy to find.
Love it. All right. In the last couple of minutes, I would love for you to share a little bit about because I love the way you teed this up and how you share this. And I think we can't really have a podcast together without talking about Disney. So I would love for you to share this concept of ratatouille and boundaries.
Okay, so okay, so we can talk. Yes, so let's talk about boundaries now. You were mentioning boundaries with Ratatouille.
Yes, because we talked where it came from. Because I love this recent segment that you just did on your podcast with Randy, but it was really and I feel like it puts a bow on this episode because I feel like if you're stepping into that and you are going towards your mission and you are all in, you are absolutely gonna have critics. You're going
Yes.
to have people who are going
Yep.
to push back on that. And if you listen to that, if you listen to the wrong voices, it can absolutely derail you and take you away from what you're supposed
Okay.
to do.
So we're gonna talk about Ratatouille in two different ways.
I
So
love
for
it.
those of you that don't know the movie, fun movie, great movie, ridiculous when you hear me tell you the plot. If you haven't heard the movie, it's like there's a rat in Paris, and that rat happens to be the best chef in Paris, but he's a rat. So no one wants to have a rat make their food. So that's what the movie's all about. And the villain character is a food critic named Ego. And so he goes into these restaurants and he just tears them up, just writes these scathing reviews, right? And so the whole movie kind of moves to this point where Ego's going to come in and review the restaurant. And there's a great moment at the very end of the movie. I think it's the best part of the movie. It's this monologue that Ego does. He's sitting in his desk after he's had this amazing meal, like it was like it brought back memories of his childhood, and he realizes this rat's cooked the meal and he's trying to wrestle with this in his mind. He's back at his office and he talks about how writing, being a food critic is fun because you just tear up other people's work. And he said, but sometimes you have to learn how to embrace the new, and you've got to be able to kind of encourage that. So there's a couple things in there that can remind us. One, don't be a critic. So that's a good fundamental thing for us as managers and leaders. Don't be a critic. Be a coach, not a critic. So we're not going to tear up other people's work. Tearing up other people's work is really all about us. Okay, it's about us trying to look good. We're trying to nurture their work. Okay, kind of help them be New York Times bestsellers using that kind of author editor analogy. But the second, to your point, Whitney, is you've got to have you have to have boundaries, but you also have to have other things. So, in addition to my Venn diagram before, there are four really, really rare jewels in life that we want to have, and they are kind of we've talked about purpose, courage to take that first step. A purpose kind of is the North Star. Courage is the first step. Faith, so we take the second and third step. Just can't see it, and then will. Will is that fire in our belly that keeps us going. So you have to have all four of those things. You want to do something really big and different in the world. Because if you're a rat in Paris and you're a great chef, not a lot of doors are going to open for you. So I think there's something there too. So it's boundaries, but it goes even further than boundaries. You've got to have all those kind of jewels in your pocket if you want to kind of make it through that kind of adversity and those kinds of obstacles. So yeah, lots we can learn from Ratatouille.
I need to go back and rewatch this movie. I've seen it, but it's been a moment. But I remember specifically what you are talking about of the scene. So,
Yeah,
uh, but I love that. I love how you just tie that in, and I really feel like that puts a big, beautiful bow on what we talked about today. Because you've got to, I mean, it's great if you know all these things, if you know your strengths and your passion and your purpose, but you just stop anytime some resistance hits you. You're not really gonna
yeah,
get that far.
yeah, agreed, 100%.
Well, Brandon, this has been a gift. I knew it would be. Thank you so much for coming on and just sharing of your wisdom and time with us.
Whitney, of course. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.